Welcome to the new podcast, In the Garden with Susan. I'm your host, Susan Ladner. I will aim to bring you top quality information on how to save open pollinated seeds, grow a garden, and preserve what you grow. Every Wednesday, I'll be sharing practical tips and techniques to help you on your journey to food security. Join me as I preserve the abundance of produce that my garden provides. Learn new ways of putting food away for the winter and some old ways that are from another century. You can find this podcast on Shopify and at my website. Come on, let's go wander down to the garden and awaken the dreams, history, and love that is held inside every seed. The people who live in the city that are in apartments or are in houses where they don't have a lot of space, what would you suggest for them to, besides preparing with some food storage and things like that, what can they be doing to grow food or to be supplementing their fresh food supply coming up in the spring or even now?
I'd really recommend you get started now. If you've got a sunny windowsill, you're golden. I would recommend starting out with a couple of herb plants. So we talked about mint earlier. Basil's another fantastic one. Chives are also great. Get as big a pot. Put them in as big a pot as can fit on your windowsill. Hopefully that's a pretty big pot. If you got a little bitty pot, there's a little bitty bit of soil in there, and you're going to kill those plants because you're going to have an erratic watering schedule. Oh my God, there's a Freudian slip. You want a big pot because that soil will help hold the water better for your plants. You're going to need to water them every day, sometimes twice a day. And put them in the best place. It's ideal if you happen to have a sunny windowsill in the kitchen. The living room's good. Somewhere where you go by all the time. If you put those plants in the spare bedroom, they are going to die.
Yeah.
Because you're never going to go in there. So, and it is spectacular. It's just really astonishing. You don't even have to have a plant. Go try this now in your cooking, whatever like the classic is, spaghetti or something. Get a little bit of fresh basil, just a teaspoon or tablespoon of chopped fresh basil and put it on your food. And just that little tiny, it just makes the food flavor just pop. It's unbelievable what a little tiny bit of fresh herb will do. I can't explain it, and you think it's crazy. I used to think it's crazy. Like, just a couple of leaves of basil. Yes, it makes a huge difference. And yes, so grow some basil, grow some mint, grow some chives, maybe some rosemary is another real bulletproof plant. Rosemary's fabulous, of course, with pork but all kinds of dishes. And start getting some experience with that now. At least starting the habit of going and looking at your plants every day and watering them every day. Talk to them too. They're very, very therapeutic, very non-judgmental. And they didn't vote for any president, so you're going to be safe. You can talk to them about whatever you want, and they're very, very nice. And you'll start getting you'll start getting a sense of, because they don't have enough light, you'll start noticing that they get pale green, or maybe they get what we call leggy as they start growing up and up and up, or maybe if you did forget to water them, and you'll start noticing that they maybe start turning kind of pale, or the edges of their leaves get kind of brown, or maybe Marjory told you not to do this, but you went and bought some synthetic fertilizer and you blasted them with it, and they turned bright yellow and then died. But all of those things that you're learning from those 3 or 4 plants in a windowsill, they're going to behave the exact same way when you have your outdoor garden. So if it's too shaded or something, the plants are going to behave the same way. It'll be the same way when you have a few hundred square feet, when you have acres of food that you're growing. You will have the same experience. Now, I don't know how many people that I know in the Grow Network that just started with a few herbs on a windowsill, and they were like, wow, yeah, this really makes a difference. And they build a little garden bed outside, and then the next thing you know, they got a couple of garden beds, and then they got the chickens, and then they got the rabbits, and then it goes on. It's an addictive hobby.
That's right.
Yeah. The other thing in the wintertime, you can grow mushrooms. Um, you probably want to get a kit from somewhere. You can inoculate the either the grow medium they have or logs, and grow mushrooms. They don't really require a lot of sunlight, and they're probably going to be fine in about the same temperatures that you like to live in. You can do that in a closet somewhere. And I'm just saying that the psilocybin grows about the same way as the culinary, so there's that. um,
Interesting.
yeah, definitely get a kit for that. Makes an excellent trade item. Um,
I never even
uh,
thought about that, growing mushrooms in a closet.
yeah.
What sort of nutrition? I'm not a mushroom person. My daughter will tell everyone I don't like mushrooms. However, I love shaga, and that's something people can forage and things like that.
Mhm.
But what nutrition can people be expecting from the mushrooms they grow?
One of my favorite things with mushrooms is I actually just did it this morning. I'm actually buying mine from the farmer's market at the moment. If you put them out in the sunlight for about 4 or 5 minutes before you cook them, they will have large amounts of vitamin D, which is a super important nutrient, especially up north, but for
Yes,
everybody all the time. So that's
yes,
one of the main reasons that I like to have and eat mushrooms is putting them out in the sun, and they have vitamin D some into it, but it's one of the few sources of vitamin D other than you going out in the sun. But you can put them out in the sun, and it will enhance the amount of vitamin D that's available to them. So I eat mushrooms primarily for the vitamin D content. Yeah, I'd really recommend getting a kit with the mushrooms. It's pretty easy to do, but that's one of those things that'd be best to be guided through for the first few times. You can grow them indoors, and then later on you can do them outdoors. And I do know people that do it outdoors, where you take a log and you drill in the log and you put in the spores, and then you just let those logs basically leave them alone and come back and get the mushrooms. I have not ever been a wild mushroom hunter. I have to say I'm a little nervous about that. My
me too.
vision my vision is healing, but it's not real good, and I'm like, you know, and there are some people that do great with it. So if that's you, that's wonderful, and especially in those northern deciduous forests where they have all those there's a real great variety of mushrooms out there. Oh my goodness, the Pacific Northwest, the
Yes,
most delicious mushrooms I've ever eaten in my entire life were, in Oregon and Washington up there. Incredible mushrooms. They do grow everywhere, though. I mean, they grow them here in the tropics. We grew them in Texas and Colorado, all over. Mushrooms are another one of those wonderful universal. So you've got your own herbs. You've maybe got some mushrooms. I set a girlfriend up with some quail in her living room. And again, you're living in a space, right? And you're heating that space. So you might as well use that heat that you're using for that space for your food production also. And she has a quail cage. I think it's like 3 feet wide by 2 feet deep, and it's like got 3 or 4 cages stacked on each other. I gave it to her as a gift. I bought the kit for her. There's all kinds of stuff online if you want to build it. Um, I got these from, I think it's quailcage.com, right? Brilliant. Um, depending on what your financial situation is right now. And she has 10 quail, and they produce pretty much 10 eggs a day. They're little bitty quail eggs, but that's about the equivalent of a breakfast for a person. And they're not songbirds, so they're not exactly pretty, but they're definitely not like, horrible either. They make kind of a nice little sound. And if you keep up with it, which you need to keep up with it, there's not particularly an odor, and they will create a lot of stuff that you can compost to make fertility for your garden for later on in the spring. So the
yes, I was
quail
just
eggs,
thinking of that. You're
yeah,
making your own amendments that you can then put on your plants.
it's
Wow.
another
So
way of getting more and more use out of the same food. So let's say you're buying grain to feed the quail. Well, you're buying the grain to feed the quail, and you're getting the eggs, and then sometimes quail meat, and you're getting compost. So you're getting more for your money out of anything that you do buy, which is something we all need to be doing, right? That's the reality of the world we're in and where we're headed.
Yes, exactly. And something I've been thinking about, like microgreens, we know that people in apartments can
Yeah.
grow microgreens, but I've started thinking about what can I grow to start producing my own microgreen seeds? Because at one
Yes.
point
Yeah.
we won't be going to the store to buy our microgreen seeds. So, I've been thinking about like the radishes, making some of those go to seeds, sunflowers, growing the
Hmm.
sunflowers for the microgreen seeds. Um, yeah, when we start thinking about preparedness and what's going to happen after our food supply runs out, that's where I'm at now. I've
Good.
gone through the years of preparing, thinking about how to prepare. I'm now at the stage of, so what do we do when we can't prepare anymore and when these things start running out? Where do
Yeah.
we
Good.
get our seeds
Yeah.
then?
Exactly. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that because I do mention microgreens to people, and it is a great way to start. And in the wintertime, like right now, it's a great, like if you don't have any experience or doing anything, I think microgreens are a great way to start because 5-10 days you got something that's green and it's alive and it's, you know what I mean, there's vibrancy in that. But you're absolutely right about the seeds. And a lot of people have wonderful side businesses like at the farmers market. I buy a lot of mine just to support the local farmers, but I know they're not going to be doing that at some point in time because of the seed. But yeah, the sunflower seed, like sunflowers are pretty easy to grow, so you can probably grow them in the season that you have, and be able to get a lot of sunflower seeds from them, to be able to either eat. By the way, that is another source of oil and fat is the sunflower seeds. I
Yes,
haven't done
that's
it
right.
yet, but there are small oil presses, and I bought one of the presses, and I have not had a chance to play with it yet. But I understand they do this in India a lot, where you can take the sunflower seeds and press the oil out of it to get the oil, and then you've kind of got a sunflower cake of stuff left that you could either eat or probably feed to anything, chickens,
Yes.
whatever. But yes, so greens are another food source for indoors. I had some friends when I lived in Colorado. They had one of these wonderful south-facing sliding glass door things that looked over their deck, and they had this most beautiful cucumber taking up the side of the sliding glass door that doesn't move, and it just took up that whole space. And they got just and they had like some kind of trellis to support it. They got really wonderful cucumber production all through the winter, which for them was delightful to have, fresh cucumber. To have fresh food in the wintertime is is really a delightful thing. So, don't underestimate the value of a nice south facing window, or any window, even if you're indoors. I personally love, there's a thing called the garden tower, which is an indoor growing system. I guess you could do it. I did it outdoors also. And it's basically kind of like a 55-gallon drum with these like divots in it. And then you plant in the divots. And this particular one has a column down the center with a bunch of holes in it. And you put your compost scraps into the center tube and hopefully inoculate it with worms, and then you kind of just dumping scraps in there, and the worms will move in and out, kind of help aerate all that soil. And then this way you don't really have to fertilize that thing very much, and you can plant all kinds of stuff in the little divots. So different greens, lettuces, or kale, or some people put tomatoes in there, and then you got to build some kind of crazy structure to handle that. But uh,
Yeah.
I love that system. And I'm not sure if it's called Garden Tower or Tower Garden. There's two companies that have that same name, and one is this one, which I love. It's completely off grid, and it's a self-contained unit. And I think they have it on ball bearings. So if you only do have one light source, you can kind of rotate it regularly to get all your plants more light. And the other one, which is also a pretty neat growing device, it's a big, they call it aeroponics, and what it is has a big tub of water in the bottom, and then they pump water through the central tube, and the roots basically gets soaked with this misted water regularly that has nutrients in it that it's a little bit more artificial in my mind. You're going to constantly be putting nutrients into the water, and you're going to constantly be having electricity, and it worked really well, and it made some fabulous greens. It was a little bit more high tech than what I'm like you. I'm thinking more of off grid, grid down. Nothing's available. What's
Yeah.
going to be the simplest and easiest without requiring any uh, replacement parts or
Yeah.
yeah, right, yeah. So we got a few things. So let's see, quail. People actually do raise um, rabbits indoors. I have not yet done that, and that does seem a little bit close. One thing I'm thinking of experimenting with, and this might be getting a little bit out there, but you guys, we are all going out there, so you might as well be open to a few ideas, and that is guinea pigs. There are people raise guinea pigs for meat. I've been raising them here in the tropics in we call them rabbit tractors, where you drag this thing on around, and there's a fencing on the bottom so that the grass can come through, but the rabbits can't get out. And here we've been having some problems with mites and some other things with the rabbits. I've managed to figure out a whole bunch of local herbal things to treat it, but somebody said, "Look, why don't you just raise guinea pigs, because they are much more carefree in the tropics." And one way to look at alternative sources that you might not have ever thought about is look at what people are doing, like in Latin America or Africa.
Yeah, that's
you
right.
know, like there's a lot to be learned. And they were like, yeah, I forget which Latin American country it was. Yeah, they grow guinea pigs down there. And I'm like, hmm. So there are fodder systems that you can grow the feed for those creatures in your house or your apartment. I knew a woman that raised fodder, and she kept her rabbits in her house and raised the fodder for them, as well as a stash of dry hay and things like that. Um, so there are lots of creative things. I've done when you can get outside. I've done guerrilla gardening before when I wasn't able to have my own land, and I just found a piece of public land and just started growing on it. And
That's what I've thought. When things crash, it'll be like, where are all the pieces of land? I know when I lived downtown in Salmon Arm, I was looking at that. Oh, there's land down
mhm,
by the mailboxes. Like there's all this
mhm.
unused land. When you start looking around, but then I came to the thought of who's going to be eating that? Like, am I going to be planting it? But then it comes down to we're going to be a community. We're going to form communities and be like community minded. And so I think we'll start to work together. But before our time is up, something I really want to talk about, just because in January, we may be having this cold front moving
Mhm.
through Western Canada, the Western states. David Dubine showed a weather map that it could be hitting -50 in some parts, just to give people heads up. What
Oof.
about people have, I know, I think about that like
I
-50.
can't even imagine.
I know.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm an Albertan, and in Alberta, we do get those temperatures. So I have lived through that. You get in your car, you think it's going to crack when you start to drive. But for the garden, what about the people who I still have carrots out in my garden? I have Jerusalem artichokes out there. I have some different root crops, and even people with perennials. What might this be? What can we do to protect our garden, or do we have to do anything if we have snow cover?
Oof. Well, -50 is like that's like a whole nother world. When I've lived in Colorado, it got cold. I mean, we got down to 0 a few times. And I left the carrots. I would just dig them out when I needed. I had them covered with like a thick layer of wood chips, and then the snow covered it. And when I needed them, I would just dig them out, and it was wonderful. The concept of February carrots are amazing, because the starches in the carrots turn to sugars over the month, and they're incredible to eat. But at -50, I think that I would be taking that out before then, because I don't know about anything that's gonna. That's pretty hardcore. You're gonna certainly need, if you have animals, you're gonna certainly need to bring them in. I don't know if there's anything that you can do to like layer more like hay bales on top of that, even with the snow, just to try and maybe create more insulation for it before it gets that cold.
That's right.
I
My
honestly,
first
yeah,
instinct was I need to get out to the garden and get my Jerusalem artichokes in tubs with peat moss or soil to bring them into the porch. Yeah, that's my first instinct. I was just,
that would be my go-to.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, because
yeah, because
that's
better not to lose it. I mean, that's a lot of food out there. Um, so, okay. So if
yeah.
anybody is in the western states and upper northern, the northern area of the states and lower western Canada, just a heads up for January. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Marjorie, is there anything that you'd like to like leave us with? Anything that lately you've been thinking a lot about with either gardening or preparedness?
Yep, I got a couple of quick things. So I did not get into this out of just like, oh, it's so great to do. I was absolutely freaked out, scared to death, having panic attacks, really worried. I had two small children, and I realized I had to start growing food. So I had a wake up call very, very early. I will tell you that growing your own food will calm all of that down. It is so healing. It's healing on the physical level. You get with the nutrition and getting outside, healing on the emotional level, knowing that you can actually grow your own food and provide for yourself, and you don't really care that much if the grocery stores are boarded up. Uh, Intellectually, you will be smarter. It's just hands down. There's tons of studies that show that when you eat higher quality food, you score higher on intelligence tests. And then spiritually, you're working with forces of creation with your hands, and I'm going to tell you that magic starts to happen when you start growing your own food. So it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And even if we weren't going to face the end of the world as we know it, I would always still be growing my own food because it's
Me too.
addictive and it's fun and it's delicious. And I want to live through this period, and I want to live a long, healthy life. You aren't going to do it eating food from the grocery store. We're always seeing kids in their 20s and 30s with just turbo cancers and bizarre. It's the food supply. It's other things they've injected themselves with. It's horrible out there. But
Yes.
you can totally get away from that system, and life will be so much better. You have the ability to do this. All of your ancestors did this. It's in your genetics. It's somewhere in you as you start to do this, you'll find that there's something innately that makes you happy when you do it. Yeah, you're gonna have frustrations and things are gonna fail and da, 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 but it's so wonderful. It really is. And again, I'm so grateful for the really harsh reality that happened to me that forced me to grow food. And you too will look back on this and go, wow, that was really the best thing that ever happened to me. So if you want to see that free webinar, it's at backyardfoodsystem.com. It's free, and I'll show you how to grow about half of your own food in a backyard size space. And I've cherry picked, there's thousands of ways to grow food. I've cherry picked the three easiest and simplest that produce the most nutrition and the most calories, and that even you can do if you're older or you're out of shape. Especially the focus is on people who have no experience. So head over to backyardfoodsystem.com.
Excellent. That sounds like an amazing resource. I'm going to head over there also, and I'll put that information down in the show notes for everyone. Well, thank you so much, Marjorie. This has been such an honor and a treat to speak to you today. And I thank you for all the knowledge and for even some of the things I didn't think about before. You've really expanded my thinking. And I do know I needed the kick in the butt about the rabbits because it
There
it
you go.
has come across my path many times, and I've always been like, "No, no." But I realize it is going to be a necessity. So,
I was a raw vegan when I started and realized that in order to get the calories and the nutrition, I had to eat animals. And yeah,
like, that is so fun. I've been a raw
it,
vegan myself also for 9 years, and that is like it's like you can't even think, but
yeah.
slowly, it's like coming back from raw vegan, it's like the little steps back to
Hmm.
it's coming back to survival is what it all
Hmm.
boils down to.
I don't know why God has structured things this way, but honestly, You just can't do it without animal products. You really can't. I've spent a lot of time with diets, and that's a whole nother conversation, but you really do need to eat animal products. So, but anyway, it's all good. I'm glad you're open-minded to that. Apologize if that was too abrupt, but
No,
we're here, and it's changing rapidly, and it's now is the time to get out and start doing something different.
that's right. We need to have these conversations. So it is time.
Thank you,
Well,
Susan.
thank you
Appreciate you
so
letting me
much.
be on the show. All right.
Take care.
All righty. Bye.
Bye.
Planted seeds in the backyard dirt, dancing barefoot in my old t-shirt. Tomatoes ripen under the sun, feeding souls since days begun. Chickens cluck their morning tune, herbs in pots next to the spoon, greens that sing in morning dew. Healthy life starts right with you. Leave the aisles, take a step outside, in the soil where secrets hide. Grow your own, that's how you'll thrive. Living free, you'll feel alive. Rain that kisses morning skies, bees that hum in bright sunrise. Raise a garden big and wide, in your heart feel that pride. Escape the system one plant at a time, digging roots in earth so fine. Every crop a silent song, where you and nature both belong. Leave the aisles, take a step outside, in the soil where secrets hide. Grow your own, that's how you'll thrive. Living free, you feel alive. Read the aisles, take a step outside, in the soil where secrets hide. Grow your own, that's how you'll thrive.